All right, before we even get into this, I want you to pay attention to something very specific. Every woman in this conversation is going to say she wants tradition, stability, and masculine leadership. But only as long as it never overrides her personal judgment. They want outcomes without authority, structure without hierarchy, and leadership without obedience. And the moment that contradiction gets exposed, the conversation completely derails. Watch carefully.
I don't understand it either, but I can tell you that my ex, the girl he was with in the years that we were apart, like he offered for her to live with him and him pay all the bills and stuff. And she's like, no, I want to get my PhD. You can kind of like fuck off. And I don't want to have kids either, at least not for many years. I'm just focused on this. And I'm like, hi, I'll live with you. I think it's crazy to not accept that, but and some of it's just like you can't, like the reliability of men too. Like you have to just, a guy, I can tell you firsthand, I was married to someone who wanted to be a provider and all the things, and then ended up well, I can't get into that, but it ended up going left. So that's where the fear comes from for a lot of women. But some women just genuinely don't have that drive in there. And also, ironically, she was submissive to him, and like we're kind of even keel with one another. And I'm more like trad wifey, I guess. And it's also a thing where people assume trad wives are going to always be submissive and just like let their partner steamroll over them all the time. And that's also not the case. Like there's so many variables and all the relationship
depends
dynamics.
on how you want to define.
And there it is. She frames submission as optional, just one of so many variables. And this isn't by accident. She actually believes it, like most modern women. They think you can swap obedience for equality, authority for partnership, and still call it traditional. Notice how she even describes submission as being steamrolled, as if a husband leading is oppression. That's the exact misconception that breaks modern marriages.
Find things, right? But tradition, like, how would you even define tradition? It's actually a hard word to define.
What a nuclear family looks like. The man works,
Well, I
pays
mean,
bills.
you wouldn't define tradition as just being nuclear family. Tradition has a specific meaning.
In
right?
regards to dating, though,
Well, I mean, just in general, what would you say tradition is?
following what generations before you did.
Yeah, I think there's some truth. I don't think that captures it, but it kind of has the right idea to be charitable, right? Best way I heard this described was tradition would be experiments that cultures have done that work, right? That's kind of a thing that we would point to as being tradition, like Christmas, for instance. It seems to be kind of this experiment that the culture did, and it seems to work fine, right? It's a stressful time of the year, and we just can't seem to wait for it or wait for it to be over, but it's something that seems to work. Halloween, these different holidays, all sorts of different traditional kind of aspects of American culture, right? Or Western culture, biblical, etc. These are all experiments which work. So what happens when experiments start breaking down, like the liberal experiment, the progressive experiment? People start to look at the experiments that worked, right? And they go, okay, we got to move back to those experiments because they worked. So that's what I think traditionalism is, right? So I think that the modern woman wants to have her cake and eat it too.
Exactly. And this is the reality with most of these modern-day trad wives. They cherry-pick the benefits of traditional roles, the provision, the protection, the stability, and then ignore the responsibilities that make them work. True tradition requires structure, hierarchy, and yes, obedience. Modern women hear tradition and think, I'll take what I like, skip what I don't. But that's not optional. Obedience and hierarchy aren't suggestions. They're the structure that actually makes a marriage function. Without it, everything falls apart.
Because at the time that marriages were working, women didn't have a fucking say. Okay, that's the truth. You want to see the time where there was almost no divorce, right? We can show you a time when the happiness index was likely happier.
They couldn't file for divorce, so
They
does
could.
it count?
No, they could.
This is a lazy argument. Divorce was never illegal. It was just difficult. And that difficulty was the whole point. Marriage used to mean something binding, not disposable. And that's the problem with marriage today. Think about it. What's the point of vows, promises, lifelong commitment if you can just walk away like none of it mattered? No reason needed, no wrongdoing, just, I'm done, and that's it. That's why divorce rates exploded. Marriage stopped being a commitment and became a feelings-based arrangement. No-fault divorce removed consequences. And let's be honest, modern marriage law isn't neutral. It often protects women, incentivizes leaving, and leaves men holding the loss. This is exactly why men are increasingly skeptical about marriage today. The structure itself no longer rewards commitment.
Like, so you're accounting for like past the 80s?
They could.
Okay.
They could show cause for divorce. Even the church granted divorces for infidelity, things like this. But even in the early 1920s, 1930s, right, 1940s, people were much happier. And everybody you ask in modernity,
Well, they could get a divorce, but they couldn't have
I've asked this question a million times. You think people were happier in the 1950s than they are right now? Almost every time the answer is yes. I think they were. Interestingly enough, women couldn't have the credit cards, though, right? Women couldn't have. They didn't have all this suffering. They didn't have all this shit. Very strange to me, right? Why it is they didn't have any of these kind of feminist ideals, and yet seem to be far happier when they didn't have all this say. So I think when people say tradition, they don't really mean tradition. They mean, I want modernity with this kind of LARPing aspect. The LARPing aspect being, yay, I get to stay at home and not fucking do shit, right? Yay, this is great. But I don't think that's traditional. What's traditional about that? And tradition is supposed to be that you obey. That's supposed to be the tradition. The tradition's not supposed to be egalitarianism in the household. That's modernity. It's the opposite of tradition.
But
yeah, right. But why not? Because just the word makes you sick because you've been completely brainwashed, just been worked on your entire life, that obedience to a man, you're every bit as good as him, even though it has nothing to do with good.
there was one of those Burr moments.
Has nothing to do with good, right?
Well, maybe it's my social programming, but just my personality type in general. But like, obey, not a fan. But I am a fan of doing the cooking and the cleaning and all of the things
that you like to do. Right, but that's not obedience.
I like to cook.
Yeah, but it's not obedience for you to do things you like to do. It's obedience for you to do things that you don't like to do when you're told to do them. That's obedience.
But we could also just say that the nuclear family dynamic works better, and you don't also have to be like totally subservient to your partner.
It doesn't work. What breaks it down is the lack of subservience from the woman. The lack of obedience from the woman is what breaks it almost every single time. This is why, then you tell me, why are they filing for divorce at such high rates? Why are they pushing back against men at such high rates? They're completely disobedient in their relationships.
Exactly. Women keep talking about equality and choice as if the historical success of marriage was about oppression. It wasn't. It worked because roles were defined and responsibilities were clear. You didn't get the luxury of, I'll obey if I feel like it. Everyone had a role. The man did his part, provided, protected, carried responsibility, and the woman did her part without constantly renegotiating the terms. And that's why modern marriages are so unstable. People genuinely think negotiation can replace structure. They love to say, we don't need defined roles. We're equal partners. We both do everything. We're both equally responsible for everything. And that sounds nice until reality hits. Because when responsibility is shared by everyone, it's owned by no one. And that's always where things start to crumble.
Looks like you have something on this. Go ahead.
No. I mean...
You agree? Do you agree or disagree with Andrew?
I don't agree.
Why?
For a few reasons. I don't know.
You want to articulate those?
On what specific points? Like...
Obeying.
Okay. So, I mean...
Submission.
I don't know. If somebody wants to obey, I just...
It's not obedience.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll do what you want if I want to. It's like, well, where does the obey part come in?
Right.
Well, I'll follow you as soon as I think that I need to follow you when I decide that it's okay to follow you. Then I'll
Ryan
follow
from
you.
The Office. But no, but like maybe obedience doesn't need to factor in though. Maybe we could just get back to men being providers and leaders and women being mothers and caretakers and taking stress off of the men by handling the things that they don't have the time to do if they're
that's great. You get all the perks and the benefits.
See, she thinks she's being sneaky. Notice how she frames it to sound reasonable. Let's just go back to men leading and providing, women caring and nurturing. Sounds nice, right? But here's the thing. When you strip it down, she still wants provider men, still wants leadership, still wants men carrying the responsibility and the stress that comes with it. But she removes the one thing that actually makes leadership real: authority. You cannot have leadership without authority. That's not leadership. That's unpaid labor with expectations attached. If a man is responsible but has no authority, he's not leading. He's just being held accountable for decisions he's not allowed to make. And that system doesn't work. It never has.
I mean, not all, like, I don't think most women also want to cook, clean, and, you know,
Oh
bear
no!
babies.
Oh, that's so hard to cook and clean. Look at this.
I don't think it's hard if someone else
So you get
pays
to
bills.
so you get to stay home all day. You get the luxury of being at home with your own children. You don't have to outsource that if you're not lazy and you actually homeschool. And if you're not, your kid's going somewhere else for 8 hours a day. Literally 8 hours a day while you're at home. Oh my God!
No, I literally agree with you on this.
This is terrible. This is horrible.
It is hard.
It's horrible what's happening to women. It's like, no, it's not hard. And
It is hard.
on top of
We
that,
can't totally
you
just
say,
like
okay,
that.
I get all the perks, all the benefits, but I don't want to do that obedience.
I have a question.
Fuck that obedience thing. And it's like,
And I'm
so
not
that's a
saying
pretty
that-
raw deal for men.
But like, also, like, I can't even imagine a situation where one would need to be obedient, because I'm like looking at my boyfriends and like ex-husband and like, well, maybe.
When it matters, that's when.
But like, so give me an example of like what?
That's what I was gonna say. Like, what
In what
extent
way would
is
we need to-
multiple
what
examples.
Like, we
like,
could
do you
talk
think
about
you can beat
intercourse,
your
for
wife?
example.
Like, do you think that that's acceptable?
no.
See, this is an intentional derailment. The moment someone drags abuse into a conversation about authority, it's because they've lost the argument and need moral panic to get it back. Hierarchy isn't violence. Authority isn't abuse. So blurring those lines is just dishonest.
Okay, but like, to what extent do you think she should obey though? Like, what if she disobeys you? Then
Within
what do
the
you do?
confines of reason.
Like, so just give me an
She has
example.
to be obedient within the confines of reason. Beating your wife would be sinful.
Okay, well, if she doesn't obey you, what do you do? What would you do?
What, for disobedience?
Yeah.
Well, the same things that you would do right now. You would try reason, right? You would explain what their duties are, and you would go to your community, in this case the church, to see if you could get this reconciled, right? Because it's a problem.
And what if she continues to disobey?
Well, then there's going to be extreme problems inside of the marriage, and it's going to be a lot of fucking misery. That's what.
But marriage takes work between both people.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that.
It's like somebody doesn't want to do something.
I still want an example of obeying.
There's no disputing. Well, okay. I'm fine giving those examples, right? But when the person asks me a question, I have to give that answer, then I have to give that answer. Now we've circled back to this one. Okay, so
Exactly, circle back.
discipline.
That's right.
Discipline is a great one, right? What if your husband wants to discipline, he wants to use a belt? Can he? Yeah, see?
I mean, I
It's
don't really.
so easy.
Honestly, I'm not. I'm gonna get so much shit for this. I'm not totally against spanking. Like, I think it's got to be age appropriate, and it's got to be not.
Yeah, but why do you get to decide that, not him?
Because they're half mine, and it is also my job to protect
Yeah, but I
them.
mean, okay, again.
But I guess that's one example.
This would be
Sure.
disobedience immediately. It's like,
Okay.
okay, no, I think that it is the right age. No, I don't. What if he wants to
Oh,
take
yeah,
him?
I'll disobey.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is. Obedience is fine. Right up until it clashes with her judgment. And at that point, who's actually in charge? Because if she gets to override decisions whenever she decides she's justified, then let's be honest. She's the authority, not him.
So you'll move into the kind of like disobedient road. And so this is an easy example. Schooling, extensions of what types of things you'd want them to do for, let's say you want them to play music, or you want them to have these curriculums. Maybe you're disagreeing on those things. Ultimately, somebody's going to have to ultimately be the decider, I think, again.
Right, that's just reality. Every family ends up with a final decision maker. You can pretend it's all equal and call each other partners, but the moment there's real disagreement, especially about the kids, someone has to decide. That's authority. The argument isn't whether it exists, it's who has it.
But when I'm talking about disobedience, specifically, it's like, no, you don't get to beat your wife. That's insane, doesn't comport with reason, right? But you can use shaming tactics and utilize the church to assist you in kind of moving and counseling the relationship the right direction.
This is actually, it's below the threshold, but Alvin Sam, this is a great super chat. You have a problem being submissive, but demand chivalry and breadwinners.
Well, that's what I was pointing out already, right? Is that like you get to stay at home. You get all the perks of this, but no, as long as I keep getting what I want, you do what I say.
Well, I just think for me personally, it's circumstantial, and I'm willing to budge on a lot of things. Like, I'm not probably as combative as maybe I'm making myself seem. But you're not just gonna, especially because I have kids and they're my kids. So maybe my perspective on it's a little bit different than if we had a shared child. But I'm willing to budge on a lot of things.
Yeah, maybe, right? But that's not really the point. So the point really isn't reduced to, if I think that I should submit because it sounds reasonable, I will. That's beside the point. The point is supposed to be when it doesn't seem reasonable to you to submit that you will. That's the point.
Here's the thing. If you only submit when it feels reasonable to you, then guess what? You're deciding what's acceptable. That's just doing it your way and pretending to do it because your husband asked you to. That's not submission. That's authority disguised as obedience.
You said something about the woman benefits, I guess, most if the man's the breadwinner providing and
Yep.
One thing I want to comment on is if the woman is providing homeschooling to the child, let's just say it's that sort of scenario, because right now a lot of people have issues with the school system.
Yep.
Well, then the man also is benefiting because that wife is capable of providing schooling for the child so that they don't get indoctrinated in the school systems. That could
this
be
to be the bare minimum. The
could
bare
be
minimum of duty and responsibility of a good mother is that if she is enabled by her husband to stay at home and homeschool her kids, then she should. That should be a duty. This is not. When I see this idea, it's like a top. It's like somebody spinning a top. It makes no sense to me. It's like, look at this great thing I'm doing. No, this is a baseline duty. It's a baseline duty. You know the public school's fucked. You know they're indoctrinating your kids. You know they're doing horrible things to them, right? You know this. It's like, so you have a duty, if you can, to stay home and, homeschool your kids. You have this duty. I consider that to be a baseline. I would not consider that to be something in addition that you're doing in the benefit of your own offspring.
Agreed, but most women aren't doing it, though.
Let's just say he marries someone who isn't capable of doing that. I would love to be able to homeschool my kids. I think it's something that's necessary right now, considering everything that's going on. But I just think that it's unfair to say that only the woman's benefiting then from the man being the breadwinner. There's a dual benefit
I'm not saying
there.
Only. I'm never. Okay, so I don't usually deal in monoliths. Sometimes, because there are some all statements which are okay, but I don't usually deal in monoliths. So it's not that there's only the benefit to the woman. I'm saying the vast majority of the benefit is to the woman.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Right? The vast majority is to the woman. And the ability, I think, is a gift. I think a man's giving a woman a gift that she can be able to stay at home with her own kids. Because I got to tell you right now, you're a single mom, for instance. I bet you wish you were able to stay at home with your kids.
100%.
And so, that's a massive gift to give them.
But not enough to deal with
actually submitting.
A shitty husband.
Yeah, but think about what you just said here, right? See, that to me that's also bizarre to me. I don't understand that. Self-sacrifice for the purpose of your children. I thought you were supposed to be the nurturing ones.
So, yeah. Okay, but my situation's a little bit different.
See that? The moment a woman says, not to a shitty husband, that's the excuse coming out. Women will always find ways to wiggle out of submission. Because what counts as a shitty husband? Most of the time, it's not about him being bad. It's that she just doesn't want to submit. That's why you see irreconcilable differences as the top reason for divorce. It's not a personality flaw on him, it's that she couldn't handle being under his authority.
I'm not saying you have to put up with physical abuse, things like that, but the concession of just obedience for a better life for your kids, it just seems like it's such an easy thing to concede on. And yet so many women are like, I just couldn't possibly. I just couldn't possibly do that.
But there are provider men who are happy to involve you in every discussion and there be compromise.
Is there always this idea that because the man ultimately decides, that means a woman's never getting consulted?
Right, but for example, you talked about the spanking thing, that might be one thing that I take a stand on, and he may be okay on this one. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that men who, he's suddenly, just because of that one instance where he didn't put his foot down.
No, sure, he can make a concession to a reasonable suggestion. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Has nothing, again, to do with the fact, though, that what if he didn't? So it's not that, okay, you made a great point about spanking, and he's like, you know what, that's a really good point, and I think that we'll do that. The question is, what if he doesn't? If he goes, I know you think that's a great point, but you're fucking wrong, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? That's
I
where
would probably concede on a lot of other things. That is not one.
Right. So it's the idea of the concession with the obedience that, like, you still know better. And so that's why these relationships, I think, break down.
And that's really the whole problem. People want the benefits of traditional roles, the provision, the protection, the stability, but they don't want the responsibility that makes it work. You can't do that. You don't get structure without authority. You don't get leadership without obedience. And when you try to mix modern equality with traditional expectations, this is exactly where everything starts to break down. Anyway, curious what you guys think. Drop it in the comments. If this was useful, hit like and subscribe if you want more of these breakdowns.